Hey guys, today's question has come from my recent Facebook Live over in my Facebook community, the Frugal community. So let's go and take a look at that video. The first question that came through was from Martine and Amanda, who both wanted me to answer the question, who would I rather go on a date with, Scott Pape or Dave Ramsey? Wow, I don't think I really mind. We have actually met Dave Ramsey once, which was super awesome. When we went over to the States, 2017, we went to the Smart Money conference. And I said to Shane, if we're going to go, like, we had to fly, we drove down to Phoenix, which was not where we were staying. I said, look, we're just going to go all out. So we got the VIP tickets, which gave us a meet and greet with Dave Ramsey and Rachel Cruz, which was really super cool. And they held a Q&A and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, I think it was one of those things, because Dave Ramsey has been so influential in our journey in particular. Like, it was a real honor to get the opportunity to meet him, which was really good. The flip side of that is I've never met Scott Pape. I'd love to meet him. I think he's an awesome Aussie guy. I sort of feel like in a lot of respects I probably have more in common with Scott Pape, just conversational wise, because I don't know, he's an Aussie, and all of those little Aussie quirks and pop culture references and all that sort of stuff. I sort of worry about with Dave Ramsey that I'd probably swear too much in front of him, which probably wouldn't go over too well. But honestly, yeah, I think I'd go with Dave Ramsey. I think just because he's been so influential for us, and the opportunity to sit down, have a one-on-one and pick his brains about a lot of things, I think would be really super cool. And he just seems to be a wealth of wisdom and support and encouragement, and that would be a real honor, I think, to sit down and have dinner with Dave Ramsey. So there you go. All right, so the other part of that question was emergency funds. What do I recommend as far as amount, interest, fund, all of those sorts of things? So I'm going to sort of split this and tackle it, because I think it is really, really important that we start off our debt-free journey with some sort of mini emergency fund. And I think it's really important not to get too caught up in having too large of a mini emergency fund. I see far too many people get stuck on this step. And I think that there are arguments to go either way, that $1,000 or even $2,000 probably isn't enough. But I think when we shoot for those bigger amounts, then it becomes a hindrance to actually starting our debt-free journey, starting to pay off our debts. And people sort of get stuck in that baby step one, saving up that mini emergency fund, and they get really hung up on it. And in all honesty, if $500 is more than you've ever had in your bank account at any one time that just sits there, then $500 is an amazing emergency fund. And I think we get caught up too much on the nitty gritty of some of these steps rather than just seeing the bigger purpose. So your mini emergency fund is an amount that is set aside just to stop you from having to rely on forms of debt and credit should you happen to come across an emergency. And I think that's the bigger picture that we need to focus on. I think $1,000 is a great starting point. And I think if you want to start with aim for $1,000, get $1,000 in the bank. That's going to stop you having to lean back into debt if an emergency should crop up. And then you can focus on starting to really hit your debt snowball, start to pay that off, and move into baby step 2. But a lot of people do find after they've started to do that, reevaluate and think, okay, so if I'm in a situation where perhaps I'm in a car accident and I need to pay the excess, $1,000 might not be enough. So I think it's okay to up that a little bit during baby step 2 if you want to, but I wouldn't worry too much about having too large of a mini emergency fund right in the beginning. Let's just get enough in the bank. $1,000 is great. $2,000 if you want to in Australia. I understand the arguments for wanting a little bit more. And certainly we started off with $1,000 and then we did bump it up to $1,000 plus a fortnight's worth of rent, which was $800. So we had $1,800 in our mini emergency fund in the beginning to get us through baby step 2, simply because of that security and because we did not want to rely on debt should anything happen, and that's the idea of an emergency fund. As far as where to put that, I suggest putting it somewhere where it's accessible but not too accessible. So we have it with we have our emergency fund with another online bank. So we have it with UBank at the moment. I think it's more important just to have it accessible but not too accessible, so you're not tempted to dip into it. So we elected for a bank that didn't OSCO across to another bank. So it takes 24 hours to clear. Just so we weren't tempted to dip into it if it wasn't a genuine emergency, and that was a little bit of training that needed to happen. When we start talking about your fully funded emergency fund, that's sort of almost a separate discussion. So I think it's very personal whether or not you go for 3 months or 6 months, and I honestly think that it comes down to a couple of things that you need to take into consideration. The first one being how stable is your income, and if you think that it's very stable and perhaps both you and your partner work, then having a smaller emergency fund of 3 months will probably work for you. We looked at a few extra things, like it wasn't just enough for we didn't just take into consideration 3 months of living expenses. We looked at other things like, say for example, we had because the old saying bad luck comes in 3, so what if we did have to rely on our emergency fund and we had to claim on our insurance, so we needed to cover the excess, and we sort of put in a couple of those scenarios, and what we decided was that at the moment 3 months is enough to cover us for all of those sorts of things, but we would like to continue to work up to 6 months. And the other thing that we decided to do was to continually add to our emergency fund a little bit. So at the moment it's $200 a month. And the idea being that if we continually feed into it, it's growing, but it's also staying in front of any increases in our cost of living. One of the things that I didn't want to have happen was set that goal of saying, I'm going to save up 3 months worth of living expenses. I'm going to go off my bare bones budget. What's the minimum that we can live off that we need to cover? Times that by 3, and then move on to the next step and never revisit it. Because we've all seen the cost of living go up, and it is something that happens all the time. And I just wanted to be able to stay in front of that. So that's where that comes from. Because we started to talk about then a much larger amount of money, interest rates, I wanted to get a good interest rate on it. Again, not so much because this money is an investment. Dave Ramsey is very big on making very clear that we do not view our emergency fund as an investment, so to speak. It's a safety net. But what I wanted to do was be making sure that I was getting the best interest rate that I could on that money, so that it was outpacing or staying as close to the inflation rate as possible. And it's really hard. Most of our savings accounts, the interest that they pay on that is less than the rate of inflation. So basically, the idea being that if you take $100 and you park it away in a bank account, and it sits there and it stays at $100, a year from now, 5 years from now, it doesn't hold the same value in our currency. So what we can buy for $100 today, we're going to be able to buy a lot less with $100 in, say, 5 years' time. So that was the idea basically behind getting the best interest rate that we could. but it is still an interest rate that is not outpacing inflation. It's just the way that it is. So that goes back to why we continue to add and grow our fully funded emergency fund at this time. So I think that it is important, again, to have access to it, but not too much access to it. So at the moment, we have our fully funded emergency fund and our house savings that we're putting aside for a house with UBank, because when I looked into that at the start of the year, they had the best interest rate going around, fee free, which is also really important. No real hoops to jump through. I really dislike having bank accounts where you have to jump through a whole heap of hoops to get a great interest rate. And they're an online bank. It's really easy to transfer money to and from, but I don't have direct access to it. So I have not linked that. I haven't set up the ATM card that came with the, so I got a UBank saver, but you also get a transaction account with that. I haven't even activated that, and I have not linked that up to my phone. So it's just an online savings account by itself. And the idea being, again, it's another step. If I need to access that money, any emergency that is a true emergency can wait 24 hours for me to be able to access that money. So that's the idea behind that, so to speak. I would recommend shopping around to make sure that you're getting a good interest rate for any money that you sort of have sitting around, so that you're thinking about keeping up with inflation. We're not talking about actually making money off our money at this point. I think the amount for your fully funded emergency fund is an independent thing depending on your specific situation, but I would be looking between 3 and 6 months. I'd consider going a 6-month emergency fund down the track. That's certainly going to cover a lot more things if you start to think like, what would happen in the case of a family tragedy or something like that, having the cash on hand and being able to pay for funerals and all of that sort of stuff. So a larger amount will definitely has its benefits down the track, but they're very personal things as to how you want to deal with those and have things in place to cover those sorts of things. When Shannon and I sat down and talked about it, one of the things that we looked at in our country is if we do end up in a situation where we are out of work, we do have government support and means available to us. We would like to think that if we do happen to need to rely on those sorts of things, it wouldn't be a long-term situation. We are in a situation that would be for me. We are in a situation where Shannon does receive a disability support pension because of his condition. So that's why we opted for a smaller emergency fund, because all of those sorts of things factor in. And everybody needs to take all of those, I think, factors into their decision as to whether or not they want a 3 or 6 month emergency fund. I know some people have a 12-month. I don't know, I think that's probably a little bit excessive, but that's just my personal opinion. I would rather move on to other things like saving up for a house and all those sorts of things, which probably factors into why we've gone for a smaller one, because yes, we do have those house savings that we can draw on as well, should we need to. So, that was a long-winded answer. I might have to set a timer to make sure that I stay on track and don't go way over time here. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I would love for you to come and join us for our next Q&A over in our Facebook group. It is totally free to join, and I would love to hang out with you and get to know you a little bit better over there. I'm going to leave a link to the Frugbundant community on Facebook in the description below. All you need to do is click the link and say g'day. Oh hey, and don't forget, if you did find today's video useful, if you could please give it a thumbs up, that would be fantastic, and it really does help me know what kind of content you guys are enjoying. Don't forget, you can also hit that subscribe button down below so you can stay up to date with all of my latest content. I do have heaps of new videos in the works for you guys, so you too can get more bang for your buck so you can live the life you want. Alright, I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!